Aloha, I'm Brad Bordessa from liveukulele.com, and today we're going to talk about simple chord substitutions for more complex harmony sounds. Alright, so what this lesson is going to focus around is using two different minors in a key to actually substitute the sounds of a more complex jazz turnaround chord. Okay, so in the key of F, we'll work in the key of F today. The turnaround chord is a C7. So F, C7, F. F is our home, C7 is the turnaround chord. Okay? By using these two different minors, we can imply more complex sounds. And we're still outlining the sound of the C7 turnaround. Right? So if we look at this closer, this is a G minor chord. Alright, the notes in a G minor are G, B flat, and D. Alright? Kind of on the other side of the coin for this chord, what it's substituting for is a C9 chord. If you look at a C9 chord on the ukulele, because we only have 4 strings and a 9th chord has 5 notes, we have to take one note out and leave one note out. And usually what you do is you remove the root note. So if you look at a C9 chord, it contains all the 9th chord notes except for the root. So in our case, with this C9 voicing here, top down it's B flat, E, G, and D notes. Alright? But the ones we're interested in are G, B flat, and D, same as the G minor. At any point in music, you can always take pieces of a chord and use just pieces of a chord at any point, right? You play a G7 chord. A piece of a G7 chord is a normal G chord. So anytime you need to play a G7 chord, you could always play just a normal G chord with 3 notes instead of the 4 notes that are in a normal 7th chord. So again, in this case, a 9th chord usually has 5 notes or 4 notes in an ukulele's case. But we're going to take 3 of those that help outline some of the sounds, not necessarily all of the sounds, but some of the sounds of that 9th chord, and we're going to play just those. Alright? So, if we play our F, I'll play F and C7, and then F and G minor, and hopefully you can hear how the G minor and the C7 are related sound-wise. And then with the G minor. So similar, they're not the same, but because the G minor is different in that it's not the normal 7th chord, it has a couple extra things in there. It sounds, to me it sounds nicer, it's a little bit softer, a little more jazzy, it's got a really, really cool sound to it. And because of the way it substitutes for a C9, we can think of it as a C9. Works for me, close enough. The second chord we're going to look at is an A minor chord. 2 frets up from the G minor. That's an A minor. And for this situation, using an A minor, still, again, this is going to be a substitution for a C7 chord. Okay, so we got to think about why we would ever use an A minor over a C7. And the reason is that an A minor 7 is the same as a C6 chord. And the C6 chord is 1 note away from being a 7th chord. And by having that 6th sound in there instead of the 7th sound, a lot of times it's more Hawaiian. Like you hear steel guitar played in Hawaiian songs, or any kind of song really, but Hawaiian steel guitar is tuned to a 6th tuning normally. So it has that Hawaiian sound because those are the substitution chords you're playing on the steel guitar. Is, you know, you're playing lots of 6th chords and minor 7 chords and things like that, and that really brings out that sound. So in this case, instead of the C7, we're playing kind of a fake version of a C6. All right, using that A minor 7 sort of sound. But because you don't always need all the notes of a chord, we're just going to take the A minor out of the A minor 7. So we're missing a note. So when we play A minor, we're just dropping that 7th note. And in our case, still works. Okay, so I'll play an F to a C7 and then an F to an A minor, and you can hear kind of the difference in how it might be part of a turnaround or not. And then with the A minor. Right, sort of a different color than the G minor was, and perhaps a little more out, a little bit less reminiscent of the C7 chord. But you start putting these together and linking them, and all of a sudden you have this sort of magic trick with chords. Okay, so if I play an F and then a G minor and an A minor and a G minor, it creates a movement, and the chords work together to sort of outline the sounds of a C7 without actually being a C7. Right? That could be the same as but that second version is a lot more boring because there's less going on and it's less complex. It might be more suitable in certain cases, and definitely don't throw this option out. But if you want something a little bit more interesting, especially if you're playing by yourself, by having more chord movements and more jazz notes in the chords, it's going to sound a little bit more full, and you sound a little bit more like the fancy big band when it's just you. Okay? The final trick to making this sound really smooth is the chromatic chord in between these two. Usually if you have two of the same chord shapes that are 2 frets apart, you can almost always connect them with a chord in between, moving up or down to the next chord. For instance, right, you could go G minor, G sharp minor to the A minor, and you can go down. Right, starting to hear it. This was really exciting for me when I figured this out. This was like, wow. So if we do that, that makes it even more interesting. Right? That chromatic sound makes it even more jazzy and even more tasty. All right? The cool thing with this is anywhere you can play a minor voicing, you can do this. So if I was to take these and reshuffle our deck of cards, our notes, and find the next inversion of a G minor, that would be up here on the 5th fret, stepping down from the 5th fret, 5th fret, 6th fret, 7th fret on the A, E, and C strings. We can leave the top string open. If you're playing in other keys, you might not want to leave the top string open, and you just use the 3-note version of the chord. And you can use a pinching action with your fingers, pinch with your thumb, index, and middle fingers on each of the chord notes, so you don't get the extra string, whatever the extra string might be. Or you can play the full chord. But sometimes when you're doing these substitutions, it's nice to have a minimalist approach, and you only use just the notes you need and nothing more. But you can try it both ways and see which one you like best. So our second inversion of the G minor up here on the 5th fret with the step looking shape, we can again go up 2 frets to the A minor or back down. And again, that's the same G minor, A minor, G minor sort of sound in the F that we can use for a C7. So how you would apply these in a song is anytime you have a C7, like say we have a turnaround like this, so F, 2, 3, 4, C7, 2, 3, 4, F. And that's our pattern. So 1 bar or 4 counts of each chord. 1 bar of F, 1 bar of C7. So you're only going to use the G minor and the A minor on the bar of C7. So you've got to figure out a way to divide up the C7 bar however you feel is appropriate. And you can use any combination of these chords, whatever works best, whatever sounds best. But here are some ideas that come to my mind. So 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now I'll try some substitutions. All of those fit within the bar of C7, but there's lots of different ways of stringing the chords together. Let me try one more, and I'll do some chromatic movements up and down between the G minor and the A minor to maybe get an even smoother sound. Right? Sounds good. Something like that might be a little bit overboard, but you get the idea. Chromatic chords moving up 2 frets are always pretty smooth. So you can use that in any place you have a turnaround chord. Feel free to transpose it to other keys. Again, it's going to be the root, and then the 2, and the 3 minor, right? So in the key of F, our root is F. We go up to the second note in the scale is a G minor, G minor, that's our first substitution chord, and then the third minor, A minor, is our second substitution chord. So F, G, A, those first 3 notes in any scale are going to be your root, and then the 2 options that you have for a turnaround substitution. So these turnarounds again can be substituted for the 5 or the 5-7 chord, which in the key of F would be C7. So I encourage you, transpose this around, play with it, try and find all the different versions of those 2 minor chords and how they link together on the fretboard being next door neighbors, and how you can add the chromatic chord in between them to get to one to the other. Check out my ebook called Ukulele Chord Shapes. It's a really detailed look into the theory and all the shapes you could possibly ever use on the ukulele. And jazz songs and everything, and it's sort of a unique approach where I take a look at the root and where the root is located in the shape and how to move that around on the fretboard instead of having to learn every single chord and every single name like that. So you learn one chord, you can move it around into all 12 keys and get 12 chords with one shape instead of having to think, okay, 1 chord, 2 chord, 3 chord, 4 chord, up to 12. So check that out. I'll put a link in the description or on the page if you're on Live Ukulele. If you're not on liveukulele.com, come check it out. Again, link in the description. I'll see you guys around. Aloha.